Welcome to Modern Mythology, a podcast that explores the many intersections of story and system. In every episode, we will discuss some facet of how RPGs function as modern myths, providing a shared canvas for creativity and the collaborative discovery of new worlds. For more information about this episode, articles, or links to our other related projects, visit modernmythology.net.
Well, welcome. We have a new host. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, a little bit, like, what's your gaming experience? What have you been playing lately?
Well, all my gaming experience is Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
So, and I've been playing that lately. I've been getting family involved and have a couple different sessions going currently.
And you said you were telling us a story that your kids had a lackluster experience playing Dungeons and Dragons, and you cobbled together something for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I'm never going to forget. I mean, I had my 10-year-old who's just started playing, got together with a group of his peers, and they couldn't get the game going. They were arguing, and ultimately it's going to be disappointing if they couldn't play D&D, because that's what they got together for. So I stepped in and said, you know what, I'll be the dungeon master for you, and I'll get to show you, how show you the ropes, and without having to build the characters, just jumping into it, having them build their characters as they went. To say, oh, you got that skill, write that down, right? Oh, you're carrying that item, use that item. And it's great. I really, really am a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons in terms of gaming, but that's my only exposure. That's my only experience in tabletop gaming.
I'm really curious as to, like, audience-wise, I'm curious how discordant that would be to traditional Dungeons and Dragons players. Like, I don't know. Like, we have a very different sort of environment and types of, obviously just me being involved, right, is already sets the scale against Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah.
At least running in the standard way.
Well, one of the first things you said to us, because we've played together, was, just so you know, I don't like playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
But we will play Dungeons and Dragons because that's what you guys are doing.
Because I want a game, right? And that's what people want to play, I mean, I just recently saw a thing. It was kind of a funny meme by Elder Goblin, who's a content creator on YouTube. And one of his posts on Blue Sky was, or he shared a post on Blue Sky that was a meme that was like, mods who complain that people aren't playing D&D, but then mod D&D to be or other games,
That's a really common thing.
Right. And that's what we're doing, right? This is the ideas, while we're playing other games, we are offering this idea of, like, you can still play the game you love, but use those games to inform. And I think there's an interesting conversation there, not necessarily between us, because I think we all would agree that that's role-playing, it's gaming,
right.
It's probably just as Dungeons and Dragons as it's not. But I'm curious if there's people out there who would be like, well, you weren't really playing Dungeons and Dragons. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Oh, yeah. Certainly weren't.
And I'm not trying to put that on people. I'm curious. That's
right.
Not a rhetorical question.
Right.
I'm honestly really curious if people would perceive that as D&D. So we see a lot of, I've been hearing conversations about people who use subsystems, right?
Sure.
And in sort of use these ideas that we're talking about, bringing system to this. And ostensibly, that's what you did. You said, I know what a player looks like. I know what a character looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I know roughly how many skills they have. I roughly know what their proficiency bonus would be, right? At what level. So we'll call them 0 level characters. And you could, over the course of that 4 hours, and I know you could because I've done it, right? Over the course of those 4 hours, just feed that many
and
skills.
Build up the characters. And honestly, I didn't have the time with them to sit down and make several characters with several 10-year-olds. Because by the time we got to the end of that session, it would have been over. So, really just for the sake of, having a story and having characters to start with, just dive right in.
And you said with Chronicles of Darkness, that's been a scenario you've seen also.
Yeah,
right?
sort of.
You could start blank slate and then feed.
For at least when I'm running, it's usually more about this sort of idea of TV believability, where it's like imagine your character is a character on TV, like a TV show, and do they have this item? Do they have this, like those sort of things? Like what kind of skills do they have? And there's sort of like, assumptions that kind of come out of that. I use that more with supplies because I don't usually run, unless it's like part of what we're doing. I don't usually run like really like resource intensive games where it's like, how many rations do I have in my pack?
Spell components.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to make your players go hunt down and buy spell components?
Exactly. Although I have actually the Witch Hunters campaign, like the spell components are oftentimes the body parts of the monsters that they're killing and stuff. Right. So that's part of the campaign, part of the story. So then it becomes important. But,
have they sold any of those components?
Yes. Actually, they've been trying to start a business repeatedly. They've been so much in the wilderness that it's very hard to start a business when you're in. They're finally, like, this campaign's been running like that's actually 30 sessions now. They're only now coming to the first city. Because the whole time there's like a lot of Chernaya at this point in time in the history is like villages and towns and lots of wilderness, and that there are 2 huge cities. And they left like being close. They started out being close to the capital, but not in it. And they've been traveling the whole time to this big northern city, and they're just arriving to it now. So it's
and you just wrote like a long, or you're working
24
on a 24-page document.
Because it's basically it's almost like we're starting a second campaign. Same characters, but it's it's going to be the city campaign now because they've been in the wilderness the whole time. But anyway, this is a side
I think that's pertinent to what we're sort of talking about, like thinking about Torchbearer, right? And how resource dependent it is, and how resources are then destroyed or divvied out through consequences, right? Or ways that you acquire resources. But like, I did really struggle because you guys did the same thing where I tried to keep you out of the city and you kept wanting to. I made you 4 days away from the city and you were like, nope, we're going to march. I like did everything I could.
That was done because the system made us, because we had to go there to raise our level.
Right.
Enough experience that we could raise like 3 levels, and we were like, we're still out here at first level.
The interesting thing is that I like set up these settings, right? That hopes that you would develop them enough to be small cities. Where you could take your town phases in those homesteads, in those settings.
Oh, there you go.
And then instead
we got kicked out of one of them.
Well, you got by consequences, right? But instead of engaging with the settings, we were like, fuck it, we're just going to go back to town.
I actually didn't even know that was an option.
Do you remember a friend of ours actually was in a campaign, and I was really always curious how this went, where essentially they were all 0 level peasant characters, and the entire campaign was about them surviving. Wow. They were never going to advance in level, but then
I remember that. I played a couple 0 level campaigns where it was like the prologue adventure. But
This was the entire campaign that just sort of established.
Actually, that's kind of a fun idea that you're not gaining in hit points, you're not getting more stats and stuff. But that you are gaining in, like, you're attracting followers, you're getting gold, you're building better things, you're getting more equipment.
You're farming. Your character's literally farming.
Sure. That's really kind of interesting. So we're excited. This is a good opportunity to have this sort of continuum of players, a continuum of gamers in this group, right? Where we have me at the very far end right, of, a myriad of systems, and those are my preferences, and so forth. And Jamie, you and Mark are kind of in the middle.
I've played in a decent number of systems. I probably played about 20-ish systems, but I've only run 3 really.
Right.
With any more than one session, anyways.
Right.
And
I think you and Mark are kind of in the middle there, and then.
And I'm the skeptic.
Right.
Honestly, at this point, coming at it and just thinking about if someone, if you guys called me up one day and was like, hey, I'm going to run this, this system that I've never heard of, I would just, not be terribly interested, to be honest with you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think maybe a lot of players that are like that, or maybe players that have only played D&D,
right,
which is probably a good portion of them. You say, hey, we're going to run, Coriolis,
D&D plus D20 maybe, but it's basically the same system.
Yeah, but even then, the high fantasy is in my mind just synonymous with the tabletop role playing game, right?
Yeah,
right. And luckily I've been around you guys enough to be willing to broaden my horizons a little bit, and that's today. You know what I mean? That's but other than having gone through, you having to suffer playing D&D with, it probably wouldn't happen. And I wonder if there's a lot of players, that probably are in that same boat.
I definitely think there are.
Like you think about people that you would call up and just be like, hey, I want to play a game.
Yeah. And part of it is just the cost, mental cost, and also like literal cost of buying and learning a whole new system. I mean, for me, it's the learning is almost the harder part, because you can read the book, but if I don't use it, it's gone. I've read most of the systems on my bookshelf. I've only run a couple of them, and if you were like, how do you run it? I don't remember. Because I haven't done. I have to kind of drill it in.
You have to do it.
Yeah, repeatedly. Or it gets lost. D&D I got done long enough that it's just I still know the damage of a bastard sword. And I'll probably on my deathbed. I still remember that. But,
yeah, that's kind of interesting. I think I have so much rattling around in there. It's a pastiche at this point, right? For me, system is contextual. When I don't think, granted, yes, I know longsword is D8. Honestly, that probably has not changed in 50 years.
Yeah,
right?
That's one of the things we're talking about with D&D is that they sometimes stick to things from the past.
Certain things.
Because that's the D&D way of doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I will tell you, and I did not tell you this before, but I will tell you now. I think our next episode, we have a couple of episodes we have coming up that are going to be little bits of departures from our formula, right? So we're doing science fiction today. We're going to talk about Coriolis, right, in just a minute. But we're gonna probably stray for a couple episodes off of sci-fi a little bit. Definitely the next thing that we can fit in, or the next time we can fit it in, I want you to run a game of D&D for Jamie.
Okay.
I think I want to have this, I want a control group, right?
Yeah.
I want this basis for this is how Sean runs D&D. And what I'd like to see, and of course there's the anthropologist sort of aphorism. I forget the name of the edict, right? That you're being included in the experiment already changes the experiment, right? So we understand that you're thinking in these terms too, but I think it would be fun then in a year or so, have you run a game for us and go back and listen to the two of them, and see what these were like, how did it change, or is it, is it more or less, we're not here to convert anybody. I'm not here to say, hey, play these games, but I will be curious. I'm curious how you were influenced by me running Dark Sun.
I certainly was.
Do you think you could if you could think back and put into words how me running Dark Sun, has that in any way changed the way you run things?
Well, and now that you're telling me that I'm going to be running a D&D campaign, I'm quickly running through, modules, right? Or the books that I would typically, base, campaigns off of. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one that is going to, follow, rules as written and do what's the Adventures League type, like, hey, everything's got to be set up a certain way, and I've never, been that way. But on the other hand, I always had a concept, before of, really the D&D system. You're trying to get back to, using the skills that is written down on the piece of paper, rolling the dice based off of those skills and based off of, melee, which ultimately everything boils down to, right? And, and then as we started playing and we played a campaign, which, for the listeners, we took turns, right?
It was
between the three of us. Was there a fourth person, or was it just the three of us one time?
Three of us just ran
a couple times.
And then there was two other people that
were playing, but we were trying to build a world one after the other.
And it was basically like in a multiverse campaign, so we could jump settings a lot and kind of Planescape / multiverse approach. So that made it easy for us.
Right. And even, you as a player character, really, had an impact on, just thinking of ways to have a character interact with the other characters, the NPCs that are not, it's not the stuff that's written down.
Not cookie cutter.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's the way that you describe it. It's the rule of cool, right? To some extent, if we're going to do this, and maybe I lament this a little bit, but, we got into a point where we described our characters as almost like Marvel comic book, type characters.
Well, that was kind of part of the campaign was it was kind of an MCU
just in the powers that evolved. But it's I think that came out of that. We were still using the D&D rules, but between all of us, being liberal with magic items and abilities and things like that, and certainly some of the abilities that you brought out as a player character.
Yeah, just to be clear, I played an illithid. I played an illithid who broke away from the hive mind and used prodigious use of alter self to be this proto person, and is trying to learn how to be a person, an individual outside the hive, which was the point of the character. So,
but that evolved quite a bit, if you recall, where you were basically this amorphous ball of thought that was traveling with
transformed, right? Like some sort of like
a chrysalis.
But just the illithid in it of itself, because I think that started with me running, and I'm going to play an illithid. Well, that's not a player character, race, race or species that I would normally permit, but you were playing, so let's do it. You know what I mean? And it worked, and and obviously, the story evolved, with it. But I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I definitely caught from it was your use of exhaustion levels.
Yeah,
and that was like a big. I mean, that was definitely even with high level character, because our characters by that point were pretty. It wasn't like when campaigns I played and ran in when I was in middle school where it was just ridiculous with demigods, but but still there definitely some superhero mid-level superhero characters, and so how is Dark Sun going to play for those characters, right? And I think that helped a lot with that, and that's one of the elements of the rules. It's and speaking of subsystems, that's kind of one of those systems that some DMs would make a lot of use of exhaustion, and some. It just never comes up. It's not part of the system.
Conditions by themselves are probably one of my favorite pieces of 5e.
Yeah.
I use conditions a lot, and I add conditions. One of my favorite conditions in Torchbearer is angry. right? And I love this concept that you're so beside yourself, because we've all been there. You're so upset, you're so distraught that it's affecting the way you interact with people. Right. And I think that's so interesting and powerful. It's such a great tool, right? To be like, I failed at this thing. And it doesn't mean that I have to fail in a traditional way. It's more just get frustrated, and just get, and that doesn't go away until I rest.
Like exhaustion, but that's, but that feeds into the character and how you describe the characters too.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Okay, crazy girl. Tell me something really strange. I want to know right away. Better than unleashing the crazy bit by bit. I stopped and stared into her eyes, but only saw my reflection in them. Well, I'm a witch. Kind of. Who isn't these days? She said, shrugging. No, I mean, my grandfather is a spirit who records the stories of the dead, but my grandmother stole his magic. She's dead. Dead. But she's also not dead. Also, I can talk to birds. We just met, she said helplessly. Is this something you do often? No. I don't have many friends. You're pretty, so if that's true, you must be real weird.
You could discover more about the myth-punk Fallen Cycle universe at fallencycle.com.
Cool. So we just played Coriolis. We're not going to go into discussing it too much because you can listen to it, the actual play, as well as the YouTube setup that we have, which we'll try to do with almost every game that we deal with. So I'm going to try to have a little setup video.
Talk about the system a little bit.
Talk about system. Just get a sense of all of these systems, because I don't want to spend the time us talking about how to play the game, other than in very rudimentary fashion. And that these, we can explore that a little bit further. We're going to be doing, definitely, because I have a D&D campaign I'm running, I have a Burning Wheel campaign I'm running, and talk about the characters and the development of that scenes and stuff.
Another escape.
Another escape.
And this will be the first time I've not played D20.
Right.
Well, actually, I do remember I ran Chronicles of Darkness for you.
Oh, because remember we did the Exiles.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I remember that campaign, but wasn't that D20?
No. Exiles was Chronicles of
Darkness. But we've only I think only ran 2 or 3 sessions.
We only did this shame.
It's a cool concept. I have the concept still written down. I'll go back to it.
But it was also then similar too, in that this is a space opera.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
this is also a dice pool system.
And we did Theater to the Mind, which is something that I gives a much different flavor to what you're doing, especially when you're when you have melee, because I've gotten into the habit, I don't know if it's a habit or the crutch of using a grid and using minis.
Well, for D&D, that's what I was going to ask you, because I found Theater of the Mind actually difficult to run for D&D 5e, more difficult anyways than with a lot of other stuff.
I didn't use minis in high school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't use minis until, maybe later in high school, but I didn't start playing D&D that way, right? I mean, we just played around the table.
Exactly. Yeah. So but something about 5e, or maybe it's something about me playing 5e.
Or that's what I said. Maybe it's a crutch. After a while, you get used to it.
Yeah, it's like the aura is 5 feet. This thing. I mean, in that way, it's like I have cut little triangles out for your cone of cold. It's
So when I have a D&D campaign that I'm running in person and in Foundry. And I'm not using grids.
Right. So I'm curious to see. I mean, we didn't do. We did Theater of the Mind mostly with your Dark Sun campaign.
Yes.
But I just find it hard to track a lot of things that way.
Yeah, I am using minis, and I'm using minis just for contextual information. right? So like you generally get a sense of distance, you know.
Right.
There's a number of games, including the index card RPG, that talks about like near and far and really far. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Or close and near and far.
I mean, I have found definitely too, like even when I'm doing theater of the mind, it does help to have like even like little tokens or something, just so you know the arrangement.
That's, you know, there'll be a little evocative tokens. I think I'm going to use Hero Forge to make those tokens because they're really fun and they look great in Foundry, right? Another idea of stuff like that is zones. There's a number of games, Fate in particular, that uses zones where it's actually a way where you can use minis of some sort, but instead of counting blocks, you're just looking at, is someone in the zone with you in the same room, right? Or are they a distant zone, right? And how far are zones where you no longer have line of fire, right? For something like Dresden Fire, zones are nice because it's a way to create range without counting squares, right? Because Dresden Files, you have these powerful spell effects, right? Well, how big, how far, right, can a spell effect go? And then that becomes how many zones, right, for more immediate stuff.
But ultimately then doesn't distract, because you can, you know, and you know, those of us that have played on the grid, it can get, you know, you're very much just sort of playing the blocks. You don't need...
It makes your brain more literal, for better and worse.
It really does. All right. So again, this is going to be the actual play portion, right? So we won't go into anything else right now. Very bare bones, right?
Sure. We're doing a couple scenes, basically.
We just doing a couple scenes with these two characters, right? A fugitive and a trailblazer. We have Ghazi and Maisum. Right?
Yeah. And both of us are newbies in Coriolis, so it'll be a new experience for both of us.
So, of course, Coriolis is Middle Eastern soap opera with sort of a Lovecraftian edge to it, right? Like Bayaki would be right at home in Coriolis. In fact, I think there's actually a hound, much like Hounds of Tindandalos, as one of the creatures in here.
Interesting.
That's pretty cool. And then when you describe the Middle Eastern portion as being kind of akin to a Dune sci-fi, but we've also hinted at the potential for technology and AI, which is missing out of that. It's pretty exciting, to be in that world.
The ships, if you've looked through the book, the ships are...
The book is beautiful, by the way.
Yeah. The ships are not often these streamlined things. They definitely have like curves and aesthetic and like Middle Eastern stuff, you know.
Plus they're entering atmosphere. They don't really need to be aerodynamic, right?
Right. And this is called the Third Horizon. There's actually another Coriolis game that came out just recently. That's sort of, it's not really a new edition. It's really a continuation of the story where another group has found a new area to set.
Kind of like a different source book.
It's like a different source book, but it's like literally playing in like a different time period for Coriolis. So if you get the sense that basically humanity from Earth set out, right, and created science fiction as we know it, right, European science fiction, and then basically the Middle Easterners were kind of annoyed that they were second-class citizens in the first and second horizons, right? And so they went out on their own to find a new place, and that's the Third Horizon. That's why it's called the Third Horizon.
Nice.
Now, two different groups came at two different times. There was a generation ship, and then there was something called the Coriolis. Coriolis was the name of the station of a generation ship that had been traveling for centuries, right? And so they left first, right? They're called the Zenithians, and the Zenithians left first in the generation ship, but then someone found the portals and started populating this system, the Third Horizon, like hundreds of years ago.
And there's
right?
some mystery to those portals.
And a lot of mystery to the portals. Like it's bad going through.
Yeah. And no one really knows where they come from.
And no one knows where they come through. Some previous old,
civilization.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. So what that means is, so you have first comers and you have Zenithians, right? First comers basically just populated each of these, if you look at the map, populated each of the systems. And they really have this myriad of cultures that very often don't interact with each other, right? Mm-hmm. So people from Mira don't go to Daraban, people or to Zalos or Algol. Mm-hmm. None of those people really interact with one another at all. And there is space travel, but it's pretty rudimentary and really not often done, mostly through trade. Mm-hmm. Okay? Then the Zenithians come about 50 years ago, and they set up shop in the center over a planet called Mira, which is where one of these giant monoliths are. And they set up shop and create Coriolis, which is this space station, right? And they basically say, all right, we're here. We run the joint now, mm-hmm. right? Which they can kind of do because they have the technology and they become sort of the center and the drivers of the economy of the Third Horizon. Because over the course of these 50 years, they've established significant trade routes and, systemized ways to get through the portals, where the others were just various planets of people, right? Sure. They all have some common ancestry, right? And that they're human, but for the most part, they were just all the disparate groups and cults and shit like that. The firstborn tend to be more traditionalists, tend to be more spiritually minded. The Zenithians tend to be more mercantile, more space oriented.
Okay. It's funny how that works with colonists, right?
Yes.
Come over and think they're.
And do they basically control the portals, even though we don't know where they're from?
Yes. So they know how to open and close the portals. It is a very pricey process. I'm not going to really get into that because we're not going to deal with portals. We're not going to deal with space travel.
Just for the setting.
Just for the setting, yeah. And also it's like a slow space thing, right? Where even though there is faster than light in terms of going system to system, and various portals can only go to certain systems, it could take like a week to get from a portal to an actual planet.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the Expanse in that
kind of like the Expanse in that way. I would love to do a longer thing. I think the portals and the portal system and all that, I think, quite honestly, this is one of the games that doing a mercantile game, I think would be really interesting, because you actually start with a ship and you start with debt, mm-hmm. right? Because you people couldn't possibly have bought a ship. So you have a progenitor, you have somebody who's given you a ship, or you've stolen a ship, or you've gone into hock for a ship. And who that is probably pretty important. They might be a boss, they might be whoever. And so then going system to system and, basically buying for one and selling for two.
Yeah, when you have enough players for playing the crew on a ship, that sort of scenario is very fruitful for different. I played a couple campaigns and they were all so much fun.
Yeah. But also, why not substitute XP for money?
Right. Right. So, but we're not playing that game, right? We are playing a group of pilgrims. There are pilgrimages. They are system-wide endeavors. People take years out of their life to basically travel to important sites, to their various groups, right? There is a Church of the Icons now, and that Church of the Icons has brought most of this worship under the yoke of sort of like common concepts and like approved versions of the icons, right? And as such, the Zenithians have kind of taken hold and also taken advantage of the need and interest for first comers to do this pilgrimage. So there are actually companies that you can hire as groups to go on these, on these ships that take you through the pilgrimage. So they have situations, they have schedules, part of your passage already pays for going through all of the portals. Their schedules are based on the idea of when portals naturally would open because of these large freighters that go through the portals. Sometimes they'll basically have organized deals with the various freighter companies so that they have paybacks to be like, well, we're leaving at this time, right? And we can just go in with you.
It's like an all-inclusive cruise ship.
It's like a cruise ship.
Without the really exciting excursion.
But they can be along the continuum of cost, right? You could have these bargain basement guys, right? Which you have very, very rudimentary places to stay. Some of them, they just throw you in a stasis chamber, right? And just tell you they'll wake you up when you get to the next planet, and they're just cutting costs and and so
that's also taking advantage, right?
Right.
It's a certain portion of the population here feels obligated to go through.
Right? So this is part of their religious practice, is to do the Hajj. It is common, by the way, there are prayer times, right? So at various times, it's very common for basically everybody to stop what they're doing, get down and do various prayers. Usually you're praying in a particular direction, but
does everyone pick their own icon or in terms of what you're praying to?
Usually you're kind of yes and no. Usually you're praying to the icons in general.
Okay.
Right? It's pretty common. It is a true pantheon. Even though each of you was born under a particular sign, it's more like a zodiac than anything else, right? Everybody has their favorites. Obviously, if you're an accountant, then you're gonna, maybe be worshiping, doing more worship of the gambler, right? If you're traveling a lot, you might do more with the messenger. If you're about to go to court, you probably want the judge on your side, that kind of stuff. Even ships, like the internals of ships and such, are gonna have things draping around them, have gilding, have, there are shrines in ships. It's pretty common to smell incense in the air.
I have a question. So this is just a setting thing, but so is it on the ship, gravity? Is it some sort of kind of faux technology, it's gravitons and that's why you stick to the ground, or thrust based?
It's not thrust based. Okay. There is a drive. Not all ships have the type of drive that generates gravity.
So it's graviton.
Yeah, it's like
Star Trek. Yeah, okay. That's funny. I was just curious.
But not all of them have it, and you actually have to decide. So there is a point where you can build your ship. It's one of the things that is most interesting to me, and the ship becomes a really important part of a setting when you're dealing with that kind of thing, right? So you guys in a normal game, in a campaign especially, you get to sit down and decide on what your ship has and doesn't have. And there's a lot of really interesting decisions there, because you're well, do we really need a shrine? But do we want to make those portal jumps without having prayed to the icon first, and stuff like that, What is normally this is part of character creation. I thought we would do it now. What is your relationship? What do you think is Maisum a hireling helping you get through this?
Well, I was thinking, because my character usually works as a trailblazer scout, so I probably imagine I oftentimes am hired by people to bring them, to help them travel from one place to another. But perhaps I was initially hired for that, but then maybe my problem came out, or that's supposed to come out during the session.
No.
Okay.
That's a good
whether
question.
he knows or not that I have that I'm possessed partially.
What is your mystical power?
Mind reading.
Mind reading. Yeah. Let me, can I piggyback off of that real quick just to give you a little bit of characterization too? I was hoping you just turn over and say, describe your character. Ghazi is female.
We don't do that. Okay, great.
Dark hair, big eyes, slight build, right? A real like head turner. From a standpoint of like just trying to fit into a crowd, but as you walk through, there's not anybody that couldn't
bionically modified.
But if you look closely at her skin, you can see the bionic enhancements that has made her appear the way that she does. But she does have the mystical powers and the mind reading and the manipulation. So she's a fugitive, so she's trying to escape something. So it would make sense that this woman with the slight build that's trying to blend in, maybe used to the comforts of having a lot of money, also is trying to I don't want to say manipulate, but having the muscle around is definitely helpful in potentially a situation where maybe her past catches up to her. So she's not paying you. But there's reasons probably why you're hanging around her that that benefits both of you.
I think that's kind of has to be important. If you're not paying him, then why are the two? Well, I understand why you would follow him, but why is he willing to put himself in jeopardy for you?
Maybe the payment comes out of it. I would say otherwise, maybe you just fail to.
I mean, you're rich.
Check, yeah. So maybe there's a promise of something at the end of this that is appealing to you, whether that's.
Or I mean, maybe and maybe I'm wrong in this assumption, but know that you come from like a wealthy background.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of hoping for the payout at the end. Yeah. Where like I get you there safely.
And for reasons, I might know what it is that Ghazi might know exactly what it is that you want most. Right. And, she's used that to, sort of, bring you into the fold.
So I definitely think the two of you know each other's problems, right? And Maisum's problem being that you have some entity within you, something that you picked up from your travels, the something of the dark between the stars.
Yeah. I'm carrying some space madness inside me.
Yes. Now, because normally I would say that Ghazi doesn't know this stuff, but because you're a mind reader, I think that puts you in a unique position to be like, you may not know the specifics, but you know that there's more than one person in there.
Yeah.
I feel like you've read the other one's mind and it was not pleasant. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
But then consequently, I think during this process, maybe when you were initially hired, right? Maisum was initially hired, that it became evident that there was a group of Samaritans that were hunting Ghazi.
Okay.
Right? Now that does put you in a situation to be like, hold on for the big payout at the end of all this. Maybe you're going somewhere. Maybe you have a relative or someone important that you're trying
I'm
to
certainly telling him that we're going somewhere. Sure. That's going to lead to that. I think the Ghazi's just trying to get away as far away.
Yeah. But there's certainly then that, because you can easily manipulate. Yeah. But there's certainly going to be a point where like you could decide to just hand her over.
Right.
Right.
Just my sense of this character already is this, he's like sort of outsider scout character. Like he's probably not too big on authority. So like, that's probably not his instinct. I mean, if she gives him a good reason to, maybe he might, but like, I don't think as a default, like, I don't think he would turn over someone, even just like in terms of his rep, like if he's like if he's like a hired scout and he's like turning people over, like that's not usually going to get you hired.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So reputation and there's some moral ground there. Right. Yeah. And at the end. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And Ghazi's reputation is taking a hit.
Especially since you're a fugitive now.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anybody that Ghazi can turn to? Is there a sense that there are people that will help Ghazi, aside from the fact that you probably have some access to some extra beer?
No, unless we end up, back on Zalos, right?
Okay.
Back on her home planet.
Right.
I don't think outside of that she's cut out. So again, being paired up with somebody that could otherwise just sort of help her get by in the world, in space.
I am going to say, by and large, you have a lot of beer on you. Okay? You have, stop smiling, Sam.
Lots of money as well.
I think you have some sort of portage, some sort of
credit.
Yes, I think you have some sort of off-world established credit. I mean, it could be maybe a business. It could be something that the Samaritans don't know about yet that you're tapping into. Yeah. But you need to be in a place to get access to that. So you probably have a fair amount of cash. I expect them to be sort of like, the gold-plated latinum. Like, I expect there to be some hard currency that you're able to give to people if you need. Otherwise, you can do credits. You're a little concerned about using, they're called tags, using tags to pay for things.
Show off, right.
You're a little concerned that it might show up.
Draw attention.
Draw attention.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions about the?
I mean, and even I would say the Galabia, which is the long robe that's very ornamented that I have on, is not my usual attire. It's an attempt to just sort of.
I definitely get the sense that it's
still being fancy
than what most people wear, but not as fancy as what you.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And it's not the usual outfit she's wearing. She's got.
Place. Kind of thing where you're like dressing down. The first time I saw you, I was like, "Wow, that's amazing."
Yeah.
Do the two of you in any way have any sort of tension, sort of like Han Solo and Leia, in terms of like Han Solo would call her princess, kind of deal? Like, is there
more like Leia and Luke, although they're not siblings? I guess maybe.
Okay, sounds good. So there's not really that tension there.
Not like super strong. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I don't think so.
And I also think my Zoom is not quite as mercenary, right? Is a little more of a loner, but still has this sort of moral compass.
Yeah, I mean, so it's Han Solo. He just doesn't like to admit it.
But sure. Awesome. All right. So nothing says driving Ghazi's personal problem than a bunch of Samaritans shooting high-tech weaponry at the two of you. You are in tight quarters. You're in a hallway. This hallway has columns down the center, 2 rows of columns down the center. And then you have a number of various alcoves, right? And in those alcoves are actually statues of, some of them are patrons and matrons of first comer, whatever this observatory was built by, and several icons. And they're sort of interspersed. The icons tend to be slightly larger, right? A little bit more mysterious. They might do things like, they're a little disturbing in that they're sometimes hinted at, sometimes like more abstract carvings of the icons as being shadowy figures, as being worshipped. There might be like statuettes of people in front of the alcoves, right? Now, over time, limbs and noses and extremities and such have been sheared away from the elements and or from careless grave robbers, or not grave robbers, but like people looting or such places. Yeah. Right. Otherwise known as archaeologists, right? And so these, and also, unfortunately, there are valuables that you were used to festoon many of these onyx eyes or gold filigree along the edges and things like that. Right now, for anyone who has a real devotion to the icons, would be grimacing, because right now you are like plaster and stone is just spraying through the area as you're just like in slow motion watching ancient mosaics just disappear in front of you from the gunfire. You're looking over at Maysoon, who's like, well, turn corners and like fire down the lane, and only to be returned with a barrage of gunfire. These red streaks of thermal fire that are like melting ceramic faces. You can feel the heat of the discharges as the pariah's weapons are being fired down the hall. And the two of you are just hiding and taking cover and just desperately trying to find moments to be able to get to the next, alcove, while they're trying to get forward and get to you.
Are there pilgrims also in the crossfire?
You have actually been separated from your group, not actually from the pariahs, but I think it probably was from. No, it was. I think it would be appropriate to say that once you both notice, and I think Maysoon is likely the person to notice first.
Yeah.
Once Maysoon notices that there is a ship that has landed in the distance, and Maysoon describes the ship to you, you realize that a pariah vessel must have followed you or tracked you here, and you've separated yourselves from the group.
And I start off by saying, shit, they found me.
Yes.
As according to prophecy.
It is written.
It would seem that way. Yes. I kind of say as I'm like, probably firing off and like, yeah.
Although anything you would say right now, you're shouting.
Yes.
Over, the gunfire.
And the propeller head's playing.
Right.
So we're trying to fall back, yeah?
Yeah.
I think,
I'm assuming you're not trying to go towards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing from seeing the amount of firepower they have, we're outmatched.
Yeah, there's at least 4 of them. They are armored and heavily armed.
Oh, good. That's great. Yeah, let's fall back.
Now, you have 2 things going for you. First off, accelerator weapons are nothing to sneeze at. You've at least probably nabbed one of them up till this point. You are worried if there's a possibility of bionics or anything within their armor. The Order of the Pariah has been known or hinted at having much more high technology power armor than anyone else has. You're really hoping they do not have power armor, right? If they had power armor, they would likely just be
that would
just waltzing down this. So you're assuming they don't, but you're hoping they don't have anything that they can heal them.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out, by the way, that this is the darker side of the Samaritans, right? Normally they actually have some of the best doctoring academies in the Third Horizon, right? So while there is this theocracy that's layered over it, they have some of the best healers and doctors in the Third Horizon. Now, of course, you're hoping none of them are here helping them.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could, I'm going to fire what like having you fall back behind me because you only have.
I am ducked behind one of the pillars at this point, but I'm going to look around here and see if we can't find something that'll help us get out of here.
What kind of thing do you think you're looking for? What do you feel like in your desperate hour? What are you trying to?
Well, first look for the spiritual.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, out of the statues that are in the alcoves that I can see, we can fall back to. One, is any of them empty, or two, are any of them representative of the judge?
Right.
That I would just, that I would want to gravitate toward.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead and make a observation roll for me. Do you have observation?
No.
So then you're just going to roll wits.
So my wits is a 3.
Yep.
3 dice.
There you go. You got no successes. Do you want to pray for observation? That would be the gambler. Do you want to say a prayer to the hyena-headed god?
No, I'm thinking of the deities that I'm feeling closer to save me here. So
okay, sure. So I'm going to say that you look up and you can actually see a statue of 2 hyena heads above you, which is an actually more antiquated way to look at the gambler. Now, Zenithians would generally look at the gambler as a high merchant, as wearing the clothing of somebody wealthy, right? At worst, opulent, but somebody who's going to press the odds to their advantage, you can see, however, the gambler will say something to you, like spiritually speaking in your prayer. You do get a sense of right now, it's possible that your best course of action is high risk. That if you can manage to do a distraction or something that would allow you to then gain some ground backwards further into the complex, then maybe you could find a better way out. But right now, that's your best inclination is there something I can knock over? Is there, is there something I can throw across and then just make a mad dash?
That is what I was looking for. But given that I've got statues above us, how, and we'll even turn to you. How, looking up, how well do you climb?
Climbing is not, I'm okay at it, but it's not necessarily my forte. However, I can certainly take that down if we can bring them in a little bit.
There is this hyena statue actually does have some space behind it. If you
That's what I'm thinking, trying to get back up there. Yeah.
Okay.
Up there behind it. Let them pass underneath us. And then head out maybe the direction they came while they're still looking for us.
Okay.
Between the two of you, if you wanted to try a force roll, you could conceivably try to topple this thing.
I feel like I have a better shot, putting a hole in it with my weapon than force.
You could try to put a few into the base before you do so. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll give you a bonus die for that.
They're already crumbling a bit there.
Yeah. They're old.
And not super strong. Force is my weakness, as it were.
Sounds good. Now, between the two of you, you can help one another. If you have at least one level in a skill, you're able to test to help to succeed. You must state that you're helping others before you roll the dice.
Do you have force?
No,
me either.
I was going to say every person helping you gets a +1 modifier. Maximum of 3 people can help for a maximum of +3.
Neither of us have force.
Neither of you have force.
Nope.
All right. So do you just want to, force is a general skill. Do you just want to roll? 2 of you roll?
I think we're 2 weaklings here. I don't know.
We are, but I'm not sure else would.
I mean, I did give you an extra die for shooting the statue. The other thing you could do is just run for it.
Yeah, but we should at least try before we run for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You got 2 6s.
I have 2 6s out of 3 dice.
Do you how many? Do you want to make a force roll and get behind there? Or you just want to put them on?
No, I'm definitely going to.
All right, go ahead. No extra successes. All right. So it does take some time. You do note that because of the time it takes you, they stop firing. Right? So it's clear, and you can hear them. You can hear some comms going off, and you can hear them actually making some headway.
Yeah.
Right? But you are able to, your 1 success is able to topple them.
2 successes?
Hold on.
Okay.
1 success, you are able to topple this thing, right?
Gotcha.
Again, it's old. You're shooting into the base of it. It's not terribly difficult to get that done. Now, what do you want to use your extra success for? What do you want to gain some information? Do you want to gain it as a bonus to like getting hightailing and gaining some
bonus to our escape?
Do you want to learn something about them?
Yeah,
bonus to our escape from all the like the dust that
stuff
gets picked up and stuff that like obscures.
There you
where
go.
we went,
There you go.
you know?
Blocks line of sight. Right. Sounds good. So yeah, this old rock shatters and just sets up a cloud, right? Just sets up this cloud in front of you that allows you guys to move down. A couple shots get fired off. They actually stop doing that because the type of gypsum it is, the type of rock, that thermal weapons actually ignite the air.
Right.
So you actually see them firing, like somebody fires at least once, and instead of this line, it just goes, and they're like, stop firing. So they're not shooting.
Right. And we're talking. Yeah.
And I say a prayer to the deity whose statue we just
the gambler
we just desecrated,
apologizing.
Well, then
awesome.
And thank you for thanks for your sacrifice to help our escapes.
Cool.
Yeah.
I wonder what it is that gave us away. They're following us. We don't have any means of tracking going on. What do you think?
I don't know why they know that I'm even here.
We'll have to figure that out.
I mean, it took them no time at all to board the ship and track me down.
Yeah, you suspect that it might be from either somebody on the pilgrimage. It could be some sort of something someone was looking for in an interment while you were waiting for a portal to open. You got spotted. It could be a prayer. It could be some sort of
right. They could have had something. The judge could very well be out for me, although I'm still honoring the judge. I'm going to get back in their good graces. But
right.
But now that we're running down the hall, Ghazi's instinct is going to find people because that's where her
strength.
Strength, not force, but her ability to have people align with her one way or another. Is going to give her best chances.
Sure. Well, you're certainly not out of danger.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. We got to go find a place to hide.
You get to the end of this hallway, and it opens up quite a bit. This seems to be. You're guessing. You're not certain. What are both of your wits?
Mine's pretty high, 5.
Oh, you're a 5 wits.
Yeah.
You absolutely know that this probably was some sort of place of learning, right? It has all the accoutrement of some sort of academy or old philosophical, archaeological site, which is very likely something you've seen in the past, right? Is this someplace in your travels you feel like you've been before?
Probably not.
Probably not? Okay. You can see a set of stairs. Now, a good portion of the ceiling and the second floor is gone in this new area that you're in. One staircase just goes up to, oblivion, just to a sharp plummet. The other one does, however, go up to a second floor. You're not certain how stable or how complete that second floor is, but that is an option.
Are there other exits?
And then there's an exit straight ahead that continues further into, and you just see darkness. So you get a sense that not only is it not well lit, but it's an internal, right? Some sort of like internal piece of this compound. And you're not far from the observatory itself.
And that's where all the people are.
That's what you all came to see, right? So you went to basically sort of like the dangerous area that the tour would not go to.
Of course.
You've lost your liability waiver coming here.
Maybe I have been here before, and I was the one who suggested we go here. Like, oh, this is a cool place.
Right, we'll be isolated to some extent. Yeah. Be the last place they would find us.
So do you want to go up?
I mean, the staircase seems interesting, but then also because, in theory, we could go up there and hide and we have a vantage point to shoot from. But if they find us, then we're kind of trapped up there. They're coming up the stairs. We have a drop if we want to get away. Or if we go straight, we, can possibly escape.
And keep in mind that you guys are a little bit at odds in this because you're much better at range and you're much better at close quarters.
Sure.
Well, yeah. And I'm not even trying to get close quarters.
Yeah, you're not trying to fight them with a dagger.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it's like a cool dagger, it's still like if they're wearing like armor and they got firm weapons. It's probably...
I think for me, it's more 1-to-1. Like if there was one of these guys.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like you're better hiding and engaging with one person, right? Where you're better at shooting from a distance,
right?
Kind of.
If we're trying to fight them, I would say, I'd take the spot up above, and then you try to sneak up on them. But I don't get the sense that we're an even match. Do you want to go straight?
Yeah, I mean, if what you say is true, I'm
it's my hunch.
Would want to get back to the observatory if we can, but.
So, is your goal to try to lose them?
Yeah.
How do you want to do that? What's your approach? Like
I said, I'm looking for a crowd. I'm looking for people.
Yeah, but right now you have to lose them here before you get to people.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like you're not at a point where you're able. You don't know where the people are, and they're on your tail.
Right. But we have this. There's still dips and smoke up and stuff. So I'm feeling like if we run, we might have a chance of evading them.
I mean, eventually they're going to come through that cloud.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going because we don't want to get stuck in the dark.
Up or straight? Straight into the darkness.
Yeah. Into the darkness. Okay. I'm okay with darkness.
All right.
Running.
Say a little prayer to the faces.
Awesome. So infiltration is the stealth. So it sounds like you're both trying to take a stealth method to basically.
Actually, my next comment was I'm going to look for a place to hide. Right? You don't want to hide. I may end up hiding. Maybe
I'd like to try to hide, but also by way of us being able to still be mobile. So that's why the straight direction seemed like a good bet. Whereas if we hit up above, my sense of it anyway, if it's going to like a area that's missing.
Are you trying to hide together, or are you going to split up and hide independently?
Split. I mean, like not necessarily the exact same spot, but I don't want to get too separated.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
So I suspect that means you're going to make a unified infiltration roll.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who wants to help the other?
And I'm super agile, so it seems like that'd be a good. Well, my character.
Sure.
That's not like a meta. He doesn't know that. Like he knows that about himself.
And again, you're rolling
Infiltration.
Agility plus infiltration. No success.
Okay.
Now you said a prayer to the faceless one.
Definitely. Yeah.
Would you like to re-roll? There you go. There's your 6.
Oh.
So you're going to get a +1, one extra die to this. And basically, as you guys are going into darkness, right? And first off, you notice that it was light outside when you came, and the area you're going into, you notice that there are beams of light that are coming into this, but really small, concentrated beams of light. And you realize that it's creating these constellation patterns on various surfaces. So there's like orbs or like freezes of maps and like all this stuff that these beams of light are then shining onto, and you could see that there are some that will like illuminate script that neither of you know how to read. That's why you would normally have like a pilgrimage guide in a place like this. A lot of these are worn down. One thing you notice is you find an alcove. You find basically an area that is sort of like, you got one success? Okay. But yeah, so you have like areas, if you imagine some of the accoutrement are pieces in the middle of a large room, you have like the edges of the large room, and there's like lots of places to hide, alcoves. You guessed that they were either reading alcoves or eating alcoves or stuff like that, away from not disturbing the presentation, right? The whatever's going on.
And
there.
the contrast of the light and dark.
Right.
I would have some familiarity with, these pariahs' capability in terms of vision, things like that.
I want
So
you
to be comfortable knowing whether or not they would see us.
Right. I want you to make a mental point roll. So that's your wits plus empathy. You come across several corpses, desiccated, relatively old corpses, which the two of you especially, immediately recognize were likely corpses of thieves, because you actually see that they're holding some of the things that would have been missing from the arcade.
Right, the offerings.
Yeah. There's pieces of onyx eyes and bits of gold and so on and so forth that you'd find probably like 1,000 beer worth of knickknacks here that you could continually sell in the open market if you wanted to.
I'd say that may soon.
Both of you have to make wits plus empathy rolls.
This is the reason why they didn't want us in here without a tour guide.
Perhaps, but I am a tour guide.
Yeah.
So you got 1 6, 2 6s. Awesome.
Lots of 5s.
So how this works is basically I'm going to give you mental stress of 3. So your 2 6s, so it's just going to bring it down to 1.
Okay.
So you take basically 1 point of mental damage.
Okay. No.
Wow, can I do that?
Yeah.
Either
0.
of you could pray if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm not too clear on the negative side of it, so we're just gonna
Well, it's a darkness point.
Yep. You drop a darkness point. One.
There you go.
1 success. So you take 2 mental damage. All right. So yeah, you guys are just like taken aback a little bit. You more so than you, right? You very rarely see corpses like this.
Yeah, I'm even wondering, like, is this normal? Like,
Yeah, my first thought is if I can see any wounds on the body, or if it's like they're too desiccated to be able to tell.
It's probably too desiccated and too dark to
Right,
be able to
okay.
tell right now.
Sure.
But this does provide a good hiding space. Unfortunately, so you have to, spend some time with your new friends here as you hear the pariahs quietly going down the center. You can see through cracks as like their armor is illuminated by some of these beams of light of constellations and such. And you wait until they go. There is someone who doubles back at some point in time. You're about to sort of like get out, and you're like, here's something. You're like, crap,
Yeah.
Chill out a bit. As now, one of them
is that an opportunity? Because if I can find one in isolation, I might.
It's definitely one in
here.
isolation. Yes.
And the other ones are cleared out.
You want to try to take them. I'll also cover with my gun, but there's always a risk.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get behind him and take my Mercurian knife and make it clear that if I can get it up to a vital bit, whether that's throat, under his armor or some other spot where he knows I'm sticking it to him, just to activate this knife extending out is going to do him in. And at the same time, so I'm going to be threatening him or it into submission to stop and tell him, don't say a word.
Yeah, he's going to make an observation roll, something that Jamie rarely sees, is me rolling dice.
True.
He makes an observation roll against your infiltration. Oh, wow. Oh, God. So
3 6s.
So the problem here is, not that you would necessarily know, but he's got like a suite of sensors and things like that going on within the armor. That was a 6.
You got 1. Yeah.
That was a 6. Do you want to pray? Again, this would be the faceless one, your favorite.
The faceless one is my favorite, and I think I need this to get out of this, so.
You got 1.
1? Okay. All right. So
I got a guy with a gun too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Train.
All right. So this does become more of a melee than a threatening.
Yeah, an immediate standoff. Right. Yeah.
So you try to bring the knife around. He sort of like knocks your arm away and like kicks you back, trying to bring the rifle to bear, but hasn't yet. So at this stage, we're going to roll initiative.
Cool.
And all you do is generally you roll 1 die.
I rolled 2 because of my thing.
And you roll 2, right?
6 and 6.
Good Lord. Right, you go first.
Oh, Jesus. Nice.
I did my gun out.
One die.
What's my +1 to initiative, though?
That's 1 extra.
Yes, that's for your knife. So your knife is faster than him putting his rifle to
So
bear.
then I get
you roll
2.
2 also. Yeah. So your 5 actually beats his 4. So the 2 of you get to go before he does.
Yeah, so I have my gun basically out and trained on him. So when I see him turn around, just fire.
And the nice thing is it's silent.
Yeah.
You guys are kind of screwed, and you've kind of like, you will have attracted the other pariah if his gun goes off.
Right.
But right now you have stealth because the accelerator is still silent.
Oh my gosh. So many dice, no 6s.
Do you want to pray?
We're going to screw ourselves, but what the hell? That'll be fun anyways. Yeah, sure.
You haven't prayed yet.
Nope.
Range combat is prayer to the judge, which we read earlier.
Make my shot true.
The judges.
Say a quick prayer. You can hear that.
There you go.
I got 1 success.
1 success. All right. You do basic damage of the weapon. That's fine.
It's a 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and which is pretty good. You definitely get a sense that it sort of glances off a lot of his armor, but it probably shocks him and blows him back a little bit.
Use your expensive knife. Your rich person knife.
Yeah, I mean, I think since I have the initiative on him, I think I can try and.
Many successes.
No. No success in this.
All right. You actually, the problem is that your knife turns off. So you, for whatever reason, the cell dies. You still have a knife, right? But it doesn't do quite.
This is the first time I've used it in a while.
Right.
Probably since I left Zalos. I probably.
Oh, really? Like you haven't? Well, maybe, yeah, sure. But whatever it was, bad cell, whatever the case is, you'll have to recharge the cell somewhere. That means probably back in the ship or somewhere that's a standard tourist place where you can charge such things.
Mm-hmm.
So you now just have a regular knife.
Got it.
For until the cell gets recharged. He goes.
Yeah.
He aims his weapon at you. Go ahead and make a dexterity check. Dexterity plus agility.
And I don't know the turns here, but do I have an opportunity to use mystic powers?
Yes. What do you want to do?
All of these, strange elements around in terms of the environment. There is, one of these things as we've come out and attacked him is in pretty close proximity.
Okay.
So as he brings up the weapon and I've now, swipe with my knife and realize, oh shit, my knife's done. I'm going to very quickly just duck behind one of those, there's one of these things that's, close enough that I can just spin around behind it, use it as a shield, as it were. Like something that's on a pedestal.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. You're trying to get some cover.
Yeah.
That's fine. So add 1 die.
Did not make it.
It goes off. This giant discharge down the line. This is a thermal rifle, and the thermal rifle is going to do 5 points of damage.
Oh shit! That's what I have.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, can I say a prayer on that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do that. I think
Throw that in.
whatever shattering.
So
Success.
What are the odds?
Dexterity is the dancer. I suspect you don't come from a culture that really respects the dancer quite as much.
Yeah.
And your prayers fall silent as the world sort of gets blurred around you, and you're just overwhelmed by like this searing pain. Like you don't have anything to really focus on. The two of you get away.
Didn't she get hit? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
The two of you get away, but you are basically carrying
I was going to say. Yeah.
her, Ghazi. And whether in him shooting at Ghazi, you get a shot off, or, what you could tell Ghazi after she wakes up how you dispatched or otherwise got away. You guys are currently in the bowels of this compound. It turns out that there were areas and ways to sort of like get into an underground set of catacombs of varying levels of disrepair, right?
In other words, we should have stayed hidden. Would have found these otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could add some, like fancy gear,
I wanted the information.
You want information?
Yeah, I was going to try and manipulate this person or mind read this person.
Yeah.
Some information. I need to know how they found me. But
nonetheless, you probably had some sort of stim pack on you that sealed the terrible wound in Ghazi's side. And you wake up in darkness. You again can hear them sort of rustling around, probably in areas above you. When it gets quiet enough, you feel like you can probably move again.
Okay.
Ghazi sort of like wakes up. It's probably about an hour later.
You still don't know where the group is, right?
I told you they were messing around.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to take a run at them.
I need to know how they found us.
That's true. Do we see passageways out of here?
Yeah, this is catacombs, like your various hallways you can get to. We're not worried about the minutia of whether you're turning left or right. When you're assuming if you want to start moving now that she's awake. Is there anything you want to say to each other? Do you want to formulate a brief plan? Do you want to just get out of Dodge and worry about that stuff later? How do you want to approach the scene?
You want to try to get out of here and get back to the others, or you want to still try to get information out of them? Because They keep putting holes in you. I'm not.
Yeah, no. At this point, I need a medicologist.
Yeah. We can hear them still. Try to use their sound to kind of like move away from them.
Away from them. Sure. Yeah. At some point in time, you happen upon a very strange sort of area. Basically, what it is you both know what an observatory looks like, right? Big dome usually has some sort of apparatus kind of pointing up, right? Up into some sort of window or something to that effect. And at one point in time, likely could have been moved, right? In some fashion, we've seen various sorts of this kind of thing. This looks like the opposite. This is a big bowl. And in the big bowl, there is some sort of apparatus coming from the ceiling that is pointing out in kind of an angle. It looks like there are rudimentary controls. And in the center of this apparatus, or the dome, the bottom of the dome, there seems to be a dais. And then on the dais, there is there's like a sort of like it's like a weird little like stone plinth of some sort. It's very shallow, right? And then there are anchors. They look like cleats, stone cleats on the four corners where these trunnels run. So if you imagine it's sort of like a smooth semicircle, only it has these trunnels ostensibly going to the cleats on the floor. You guys imagining that? What that would look like?
Still trying to figure out what the purpose is, but
I don't think my character probably knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
But
do you want to make a culture check?
That's what I was just going to ask. Is culture?
Do you guys have culture?
I do not.
I do.
You do? Go ahead and make a culture check.
I have a feeling I'd do much better.
Hoorah! 3 successes.
The combat stuff.
This is, you look around. I suspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, I suspect you get a little quiet because you absolutely are in some sort of sacrificial chamber.
Okay. Well,
you have heard about these places. This apparatus, right? For lack of a better term, actually is meant to summon beings from the dark. Some often would say even summon the faceless to these beings, these dark beings, to basically inhabit or possess. I need you to make a wits plus empathy roll.
Do you think this is one of the things that was on the is going to be on the tour?
Now, this is what's going on. You have a choice, right? You are going to take 3 mental damage is what's at stake.
Oh, it's stake. Okay.
If you get to 0, your friend comes out. 1, 2, 3. Hoorah! All right.
8 dice. So.
There you go.
2 5.
Yeah.
There you go. You can feel this roiling within you. You can feel like whispers and like just someone trying to push out.
My eyes turn all black for just like a moment. Not today.
Not today.
So you seem to kind of grit my teeth and,
I'm guessing you stumble a little bit, hold on to something, kind
Are
of.
there other people in here, or is it just us?
No, it's just us.
Oh, okay.
But because you rolled so well on culture, there's something more disturbing than what this chamber is used for, and that it's been used recently. The gears and the apparatus are relatively fresh. There's not really much dust here. It seems to be some candles and incense and bowls in big brass, hand-beaten bowls filled with rotten food. That you guys.
Well, I wonder if there's the blood sacrifice too. Is there any hint that those little, trussles are?
No, you get a sense that that's where a person would be tied. That they would be tied, and their arms and legs would go down the trunnions where something would hold them. And you see, actually attached to the cleats or chains.
Yeah, this place seems nice. So we're not going to try to activate that.
Really?
No.
I was thinking about it. If it really is the faceless one,
Unless if you have a friend that you want to spare.
Well, I am going to say prayer to the faceless one for this, and given that it's possibly something to that it's possible that this was devoted to the faceless.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's deserving of a blood from the believer.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to take my now non-functional,
Just knife.
regular
Right,
knife,
regular knife.
and give a slice in the hand and put up on the center point of this apparatus.
What are you looking to just sort of reconsecrate? Do you want to? What are you looking?
Well, I think with
with
any true believer,
Uh-huh.
especially with the icons, being real and bestowing power, I'm looking for an actual connection. I'm looking for
okay.
like a
Sounds good.
spiritual, a contact, like an answer to the prayers, not just prayers and hopes that
mystic powers,
whatever is whatever is fated to happen was a result of I thought because I prayed.
Well, and because you're using mystic powers.
So there's just a mystic powers.
Yep, just a
skills roll.
mystic powers plus empathy, right?
At least you got one.
Yeah.
You feel the tug again, like you were stabilizing yourself. Do you ever have that moment where you're feeling nauseated enough and you feel the bile come and you're just like, this is not the time or the place to expectorate, right? This is not the place to lose my cookies, right? And you take deep breaths, put your head out the window, do whatever you need to do. But then some sort of smell hits you, right? Some sort of the weight of what's going on, your perception kind of rack focuses, right? You're looking at this, you can almost hear and smell the blood on the altar. And you can feel it just rushing forward again. What do you want to do?
I don't know if I would have done that. And I'm going to let it out.
You're going
and not simply to encourage that, but I this is the sign I was looking for.
Uh-huh.
And so I think I'm going to say to Mason, I'm going to go up and get uncomfortably close and rub my bloody hand across your forehead to make a streak and say, you shouldn't fight it. You shouldn't fight it. This is.
That's when I'll stop fighting it.
Okay.
This is meant to be. There's a reason why this is here.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why.
Possible that reason is not good, but there's definitely a reason.
Well, a moment ago, I was almost a sacrifice, so I'm
You
on borrowed time now.
can hear doors opening in the distance. And it's fairly clear that there are people in the peripheries just outside this chamber itself. There's not a lot of direct talking, but they're clearly going about and doing things. It doesn't feel like imminent danger in terms of like no one's rushing in. It's not that kind of sounds. They just seem to be doing things. There are four exits.
This is the tour catching up. Where they're like, and this is the one unused sacrificial chamber. Like, see a hulking shadow of two guys.
Perfect time to walk in. Yeah, right. Right when being possessed by a space demon.
And I've got blood splattered all over the place.
All right. You are a long dead priest of the faceless. You are a sorcerer who sacrificed yourself for an ability to escape this mortal prison that you were in.
I'm agnostic.
And so you have been traveling body to body to body to find some inner truth. And every time you have had an opportunity to find some truth in a portal, they stick you in one of those fucking stasis chambers, right? You just haven't. But here, this is a direct connection. This place, you can feel the direct connection to the dark between the.
Who has the aversion to the stasis chambers? The priest or
the priest? The priest is like trying to reach the darkness, but has been unable to. It's really got in the bodies of these travelers. And you can actually feel the previous travelers, right? All adherents of the merchant. I mean, of the messenger.
Okay.
Right? All people who follow and have the blood of the messenger in them, right? People of wanderlust, people who must like reach for the stars. And you were one of these people. And here he feels, and I'll let you play him, but he feels like this is, you have crazy magic powers. You have spells at your disposal. You can summon creatures of darkness. Here you have this conduit to the dark between the stars. And now all you need is a sacrifice.
I hear voices up above.
Yep, you hear voices beyond the chambers. I mean,
I don't know how this works exactly, but I try to use my spellcraft to draw them here. And we need sacrifices.
You do. So what would you do? What do you feel like? What kind of thing would you do to attract their attention and draw them here?
Well, I was thinking magic, so like propulsion, like kind of reaching out with like invisible tendrils into their mind and drawing them into myself.
Is it something that you're trying to take over minds, or is it something like a more the stick or of like glamour and deception to pique their interest?
Kind of like a trance state. Okay. So like kind of take over, but not to like direct them, but like sort of like sleepwalking.
Sleepwalking. Sure.
Thing. Yeah.
Go ahead and make, now you don't, let's see here.
I don't spellcast it.
You don't have mystic powers as a skill. Right. But you do have empathy, right? And I'm going to give you 1 die in mystic powers.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm not actually drawing on his abilities exactly.
Yep. And then I'm going to drop 2 in there.
I only get 4. My empathy is pretty low. So.
Okay.
Oh, no.
6, but it got to fill into this thing. So.
Okay. All right. But you did get a success. You could feel a number of people that are drawn, and something that you notice and then you kind of catch in on because you're kind of connected to this.
I just want to clarify. You said the priest is a priest of
the faceless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the faceless. Okay. Well, and that just proves that this was all meant to be. I mean, I didn't know that at the outset, but this is, this is why we're traveling.
That was my thought and why I didn't choose you as the sacrifice.
Well,
as a player, I also would want to.
You could have. Yeah. That would have been pretty.
So you notice that it's more effective than you thought it would be. And both of you actually can feel that they want to be here, that they were coming here anyway.
Okay.
You just happened to draw a couple of them early.
Right.
And you are kind of surprised to see when they come down the aisles, and there are 4 aisles, like little staircases that come down the dome, right? That they're wearing garb, like ritualistic garb. They're wearing dark hooded cloaks, and they have these gold medallions, gold necklaces with some sort of medallion dangling at the bottom, and they're wearing like these red silken scarves around their waists. And they start slowly coming down. And at first it's the 3 that you sort of connected with and like can feel like they came, they stopped whatever preparations they were doing, right? But they're starting to come. But then shortly after, you might even hear like a whisper, like Ashul, what are you doing? Come back, No, you forgot the sensor, kind of deal.
Right.
But then eventually, and each one of them almost like hastily is like, oh shit, it's starting. More start coming out of the various doors. About a dozen in all.
They were prepared for this. Can I point out a dichotomy or maybe a theme here? We've already because your priest martyred himself, right, in order to get closer to this, and now is pulling these sacrifices in. And Ghazi's here because of her refusal to martyr herself.
Right. Yeah.
And she's trying to make some sort of atonement, not that this will get her there, but just the fact that it's now catching up to her in one way or another. So I'm totally
I imagine that as the priest, I'm trying to draw one of them to the sacrifice, right? Apparatus or whatever.
To the sacrifice apparatus? Sure.
I'm going to aid in this because I will either command and or manipulate.
Right. The command
the crowd from a motivational standpoint.
So they're actually carrying electric torches, right? So they're holding them aloft. It is certainly making a lot more light. How far, as they're coming down, right? And this is a big place, right? You're talking about, like, if you guys have seen observatories, you're talking about a pretty huge dome, right? If this is literally a full circle, right, of the above. How far down here? Let's call it half a football field, right, across. How far down before you start shouting at them or whatever the case is, like, or doing anything? How far do you want you guys are at the dais, right? You're standing on the dais. A couple of people seem a little confused. You can't see their expressions, but they're sort of like, the cloaks are kind of looking around. People are whispering to each other. Some people are like, keep moving, kind of idea. How far down the dome do you before they start?
I mean, I'm going to be loud about it, so this is fine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be priestess.
Yeah, I'm possessed by a demon, so, or whatever.
Yeah. So
halfway down, mostly there,
even before
in the beginning. Yeah, in the beginning, you're gonna shout.
Well, I mean, as it occurs to me, they're already on the way down. Yeah, I'm like, this.
What do you say? What's your speech? What's your great exaltation to
come acolytes, come to show your favor to the gods in their glory and get inundated with the blood and the spirit and conjure the
fervor,
the fervor and maybe the symbolism of the face.
of the face of it.
Yeah.
You don't have to roll. They're already here for it. This is what they're here for. Now,
Well, it's also to prove that we're supposed to be here.
Sure. Some of them again seem pretty confused, but they're just going like, okay. Sounds good. 4 people are waiting behind, right? Or more people, but
Side of the door.
So there's one. They're in different uniforms. They're more white. And have like these almost stained glass kind of like voids within their like, if you imagine the cloaks are made up of like hard surface faceted pieces where like dark cloth is underneath, is what they're kind of wearing.
Mm.
And these 4 start coming and one actually starts running down and like is like, get out of the way, and like pushing himself towards the center. The others are just moving at the normal sort of like bridle pace that everybody else is moving.
Mm-hmm.
But this one person is like forcing themselves down. What is the meaning of this?
So I'm going to speak, but the thing is, like, I'm speaking as a priest, and like I don't know what his name is or whatever, but I'm going to say my name and say like, I've been in the stars hunting in the darkness for eternity, and I belong here.
And I'm going to attempt to read his mind.
So he is basically one of the main priests. Interestingly enough, you also recognize him as the captain of the tour of the ship.
I know it's a tour guide.
That you all, and that's when you start to realize that this is the rest of the pilgrims. Like you guys are having flashbacks of like how almost alienated you all were. Like people were like oddly rude to you, and you would assume maybe it's because like you're stationary, like you're lower class or something. Like you each maybe you think like somebody's because you were a woman or something.
I was trying to get in with them, so that was probably kind of a nerve.
Yeah. Right. And so like you see these flashbacks, right?
It turns out that they're just a cult that we were trying.
And it turns out, right, like you guys were the outsiders, and that they were really happy when you separated out. And I was like, what the
finally put the robes on.
Right, exactly. And so like
so shoot, it won't be that shocking if I know his name.
And pulls a gold dagger out and says, well, I'm glad that you're here. You can be further sacrifices to the faceless. And he doesn't say the faceless, like uses an ancient old version, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alternate ideology of what the faceless is, and they're not quite nihilists, but they're like, you get a sense that they're probably a group that wants to usher in a new horizon.
We be able to work together because, like, I have the sorcerer ability of the whatever it is that I'm carrying, but she has the actual like mental abilities to like read people's minds and get into their heads, and we can like work together to try to basically get this guy to sacrifice himself.
I need to find that motivation. So it's no longer going to be sufficient that I know things that I shouldn't know, like his name.
Right.
I need to find some motivation.
You want to dig a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be hard for you, unless you're going to step away and let them do what they're going to do or whatever, or like tie one of you up or something like that. Like those aren't things that you could just sort of pull out, right? You're not able to work together yet. And like, so right now what's happening is you guys are sort of like working at somewhat cross purposes, right? Like you're thinking like, how do I get to do this? And you're thinking, oh, well, I'm in this person and, we're going to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't how do you feel like you're going to find concert? How do you?
I mean, I feel like we have the same goal, don't we? I mean, at least the priest who's riding in.
Right, but I don't think you know that you have this.
Well,
She can read people's minds, yeah.
Right. And so in I think the challenge is just going to be us communicating, what we know, because I think as the priest, you probably know the faceless, as I'm going to say, the void of what they're worshiping, and maybe have some, ancient historical knowledge that they're trying to operate off of that I might not know, just being contemporary.
Right.
And at the same time, I'm diving into his mind to find out, what is he hoping to gain from worshiping? Like, I can make assumptions about bringing this new horizon, but why for him does he need the horizon? Is he's trying to bring back a lost loved one? Is, he wants power, he wants money, whatever that motivation is that I can ultimately manipulate it, because I want
the beer beyond the stars. They are often looking for adherents. They're looking often for like new people, and they'll pick up stragglers that are not part of the cult, right? And they sacrifice, so that's a good question.
That was always the plan for that.
But you can tell in the back of his mind, you could tell that they actually found other sacrifices.
Okay.
Beside when the two of you wandered off, they found other people to sacrifice.
So me knowing specifically who those sacrifices are.
Well, it becomes pretty evident very quickly, because a person starts getting brought down.
Mm-hmm.
They're being carried by two of the adherents, sort of almost hogtied, right? And carried by two of the larger adherents.
Although I'm going to have qualms here with actually carrying out the sacrifice. But
and you're pretty certain that they apparently captured at least one of the pariah.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. Less qualms.
Yeah. So right now, while yes, you as players know that you're kind of in concert, you're kind of working at odds right now, because like you're focusing on your thing and she's focusing on her thing. It's you'd have to sort of figure out a way to communicate that there's a plan. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To communicate the idea that you can work together in this. Especially since you're certainly more used to being a leader than a follower, right? These are ants, right? To you.
Yeah. Because I want to just try to command him and use my,
sure,
quote unquote sorcery.
Yeah.
Overpower the leader and,
yeah,
let him know that I'm actually the leader here.
Yeah. So do you want to try to do that? Here's another option for you. Right now, you could tell this vessel is weak in this thing.
Right. Yeah. I probably, the entity that's inside me is probably frustrated at that.
Right.
That it doesn't have the capacity that, I remembered from my last body.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll try to possess him. Yeah.
Him?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Go ahead and make a empathy plus mystic powers, which you have one of. Don't forget that you have an extra die that you started just for participating.
Okay.
I'll
use that too.
One extra
on this
die.
one, anyways.
Yep. And I'll give you an extra die because Ghazi's already muddling around in his head.
Yeah, I was going to say we're working in concert.
If you want to increase that, you could actively. No, not yet. I don't think you're at a point where you know to help. You know what I mean?
I think that was the point you were making.
2 sixes.
2 6s. He's a little more stout of stuff, more, you'd have to find a means to weaken him a little bit, often that's through either drugs, damage, severe distress. You're there, you're sort of like in, but not quite through. You could do a prayer and roll more dice. You feel like one more or another roll if you change the situation where you do something different to him and you get a bonus. I would certainly give you a bonus, right, for that.
I guess I'll say a prayer to the faceless one.
Okay. All right. So you can tell that this person starts fading out, like their brain's getting foggy. You're not entirely certain why. They're like this, and then it's just like holding their head.
Well, you can't see me kind of like being like bearing down on him and him, so there might be a reason why that's happening.
Yeah, well, I'm old tricks are the best tricks. So now I'm going to bring out the lasciviousness and just have him find us to be admirable.
You can show some light.
Well,
Sure.
Just
rub his cheek and
just again get uncomfortably close.
Okay.
And use the powers that
Right.
I would say God gave me, except I bionically manipulated myself to.
God gave you the money to buy the beauty,
and ultimately trying to manipulate him and convince him to be.
Sounds good.
So
he is actually going to be really distracted. Like those two successes are really going to be a distraction.
Before I roll and talk about the fact that this is the first time I've really played a game where you're only rolling dice sixes rather than the D20.
Yeah.
And I've gotten so used to rolling the D20s, for so long. You can pretty much assume the percentage.
Right.
And I'm not a Yahtzee player or any other kind of gambler to know.
What's the compound percentage?
What are the percentages here? So I'm going to have to figure that out in time.
Yeah. Just so you're aware, right now you're at an 81% chance of success.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. So you already know. I just have no idea.
What does 9 dice sound like?
One,
two
two
successes. Okay.
So 4 total.
Combined with these guys. I really just need him to not see us as enemies so that, they can continue to do what it is that they want to do. And I just want now proximity to the pariah.
On my end, I feel like that the priest that's possessing me, actually wants him to sacrifice himself because he feels offended by him, taking his place. But, that's just my, his intention.
Yeah. One, if he does sacrifice himself, who's going to fly the ship the rest of the way?
That's not something that would be thought by whatever it is that's possessing me. That's not really it.
No, not from your perspective. Yeah. But I think from Ghazi's perspective.
No, I think
I'm not the captain, and I don't know that anybody else can be the captain.
I'm going to spend 2 of those. I think that's exactly what happens, is that the stress from you and you coming on and he sees somebody else's face in you. He sees some religious figure, these beings called the emissaries that actually came out of the monoliths at some point in time and have been going around proselytizing themselves as the icons in flesh.
You said the emissaries?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not, man?
He has a lot of regret and a lot of things he's done. This light flashes before his eyes, and he just stabs himself.
Praise the faceless.
Yeah, I'd probably call out something in some language you don't know.
Yeah,
hallelujah.
It's spoken for 100,000 years.
There's probably this a visual of this form between the two people, right? That then kind of breaks, but. I want you to make a empathy plus wits roll for me, and you're going to roll 3 additional dice.
Okay. So
1 success.
Oh, that's so many 5s.
Wow.
1 sec.
All right. Maysoon gains a certain level of control as the sorcerer kind of travels between the 2 of them, right? Just before the sorcerer turns around to come back, right? You have sort of an opportunity to maybe kick kick the previous leader onto the dais.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah, probably used to probably more like kind of like spin him around, kind of like an acrobatic throw.
Sure, yeah, and like throw him onto the dais. So this is not your bailiwick, right? You're not entirely certain what's going on. You're really muddled in terms of like, there's all these minds sort of mushed together. Right?
Something very strange going on with me, for sure. We actually knew I was possessed, right? So,
but I don't know that that's necessarily what's going on here,
right?
Or that the the possession.
But you do see Mason Mason sort of throw.
Well, I just feel like that we're we're of one mind about, okay, this is a way to to get out of the situation and to improve our situation. But I think on top of that, I'm looking at all these people and thinking, now's an opportunity for me to win their good graces. I mean, Ghazi is a social chameleon to begin with, but she is out of her depths in that, she's never been in the midst of a cult of a church planet. You know what I mean? Normally the social chameleon for her is more, the intrigue of the
carousing or whatever.
But in that same sense, it's how do you get the masses to?
Do you want to maybe make a manipulation roll? Do you want to try to talk them into following through with the sacrifice with the former leader?
Yeah, and not the other,
not the pariah.
Yeah. No, and the pariah, but not but not whoever else they have on a spit. So,
Well, it was going to be you guys, but then they found the pariahs.
Right.
So they over.
So the ones that are hogtied are is a pariah.
Yes.
Okay, then that's fine.
I mean, they still are in it. Like, they're not innocents, but they're innocents.
Well, the other thing is, I don't want them all dead anyway. So maybe I will just focus on him.
Okay,
he may be sufficient.
Right. So go ahead and make a manipulation.
Besides maybe one of the prizes.
You're like nine dice again. You do need extra successes this time because
it's a lot of people.
It's more people. Right.
Yeah.
Not a one.
Oh my god.
Well, now I have to. The faceless has got to.
Say a prayer to the faceless.
Yeah.
Not a one. Wow, that was an 84% chance. This is a 96% chance of success.
Supposedly
with the prayer.
Yes, supposedly. Let's find out.
What are you looking at? This got that cheat sheet on it.
It actually tells you what the
it does. That's what I want to find out.
Tells you that one success. Wow, one success out of 20 dice.
Yep.
Well, I am bleeding out, and
that's I didn't even think about that.
I am like
I have an ability I can probably pull in if I can.
What's that?
The command NPC thing from the messenger.
Yeah.
If I need to, if they show reticence, I might help with that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to end it there, where you both wake up on the ship. There is a new leader has sort of arisen amidst the group. Mm-hmm. It was like, I don't know, the ship's doctor or something to that.
Oh, good, because I needed the.
They've patched you guys up. You're in good standing with the cult. Half of the pilgrims have died from what they summoned, from what all of you summoned.
Right.
I
plan to remember any of it.
We summoned something real.
You summoned something real.
Was there any sense that it was actually from the faceless, or was this?
Well, no, it was from the dark between the stars. Yeah. There was some sort of powerful sacrifice that happened, and now you see that the ship's doctor is very different. Like, her mind is very different. And in fact, when you try to read her mind, she talks back in her mind and talks back to you.
Oh, nice.
She's carrying something in her.
Well,
yeah.
We'll end it there.
Nice. Ship's doctor.
So there you go. There's Coriolis. I will tell you that Coriolis has more robust combat system than we used here.
Right.
Okay.
We're doing like a couple scenes.
We just did a couple scenes. There were other things I wanted to focus on. And so I wanted to sort of narrow down the things that I focused on and sort of what you guys felt they added to the story or anything to that effect. And part of what we're looking at here is like, look, we've all been gaming for a long time. It's undoubtable that on some level we could all pull a good story out of our asses, right? On some level.
Sometimes.
And a good character.
And a good character, right? I mean, you guys turned this scenario into you were the bad guys.
Well, I couldn't help it. I was possessed.
You're starting to sound like Phil.
But that was, again, this is one of the first times or one of the only times I've made a character that's not a paladin or a, you know what I mean?
Awesome,
and so
yeah.
I'm still trying to, and I still try and draw those parallels. So I think at one point I said, hey, it looks like we're all clerics. You know what I mean? Because the deities are real in this world. And so, I do have to, bring it back to that frame of reference for me. But then, the enjoyment that I get out of it is then building that character on top of the world that's presented in front of you as time goes on. So, and then that's when you get to love that character and then, you want to keep playing it. And I can tell you, after, what we did tonight, I can't wait to get back to this character.
And you play Ghazi. Well, it's also sort of like a fun thing to think about the idea of playing a Call of Cthulhu scenario where at the end you help the cultists. It was great. It was really fun.
Get mad about the fact that their leader is trying to one-up you. And that's my job.
Right. So here's just a couple concepts that we brought to the table from Coriolis, right? First is your personal problems, right? Which instead of you guys bringing in the personal problems, really that to some degree becomes the game master's
job.
Gave that
to us, but that was
right, and also to provide situations where that's a thing. Now, we were doing a couple scenes, so I started with your problems immediately. Kind of idea. Now,
well, that made it real too.
In the future,
it's not like a background where you're just handed the background,
right,
and then you're just playing some campaign where
the background
ever
come up. Yeah,
may or may not ever come up. Yeah.
And I think in the future, what I would do for something like this is it would be like a compel in Fate, where you have an aspect that if I want to use that negatively, I have to reward you in some fashion. I think that would have been appropriate in that case, like giving you an extra die to use in the scene or whatever the case is, to compel you. And then you can be like, no, I don't want that. And you give me back darkness points, right? You pay, you say, I'm not going to take this. I'm going to give you a darkness point in order for me to say, okay, I'll change the situation. And maybe you're not pinned down.
I do like that economy, if you want to call it that, of the darkness points in our dice, where it's like, who has more control of the narrative is kind of vague. I mean, obviously there's still that sort of conceit where like ultimately the storyteller has most control of the narrative if they want to.
Well,
but it's still like, it creates a formalized way where we can kind of even see like, oh, dice pool's building up. Like, like he could just, do whatever right now.
So let's talk about darkness points for a second.
Okay.
Did they affect any of your decision making?
Well, I honestly still don't have a firm grasp on, the implications of the darkness points.
Well,
and again, you know what I mean? Because I know what a DM in Dungeons and Dragons is, capable of, lobbying against, player characters, even from a story standpoint, but, I got a sense here, but, it was, in the actions that I was taking, I was a little bit taken back by the fact that, that adds a darkness point in that situation. Like, oh, okay, all right.
There were one
is that going to come back and bite me?
Like, no.
But I do want to point out too, just in terms of, the shared storytelling and the characters, the one mechanic, that, I did get a chance to use. And when we wrote down, I've got the ability to alter one detail per scene. That's one of the talents of my characters. And I was able to invoke that as we were playing. And that's where it's like, oh, here's something that I'm going to use my ability, if it's successful, is going to, I don't know, trying to use it as a shield, and I wasn't successful.
Oh, that's what you were doing. Gotcha.
Right. You know what I mean?
No, I gave you a dice for cover, but it didn't. Right. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I think that aspect of the game really was something that I had to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to explain the darkness points just a little bit in terms of?
Yeah. So what I was doing.
Yeah, what are we in for now that we've got a cup full of?
Right. What the viewers, the listeners didn't see is that whenever I did anything like the sorcerer that was possessing you was trying to come out, or at the end there, you guys sort of like talked the lead cultist, you were sort of barraging him mentally, and I spent darkness points and he just killed himself.
Right.
We probably have like a suicide warning in that, just so
right.
you know, for the notes. And just a trigger warning. But the idea there is that it's not just GM caveat, because as you point out, GM can do whatever the fuck they want to, right? A joke in one of my old campaigns, and I might have told you guys this, one of the jokes in my campaigns was that I had a fantasy campaign. Every single session I started with a little vignette, and I just as I got into the vignette, I said, and lightning comes out of the sky and strikes all of you dead. I started every single game that way. And there were like a point, like Lucy and Charlie Brown moments where like I get into the narrative just enough that they like,
take the ball.
He's not going to do it. And of course, I get the line that comes out, and there's no effect of it. I'm just pointing out like the ludicrous power that a GM has. Mm-hmm. And what this does is to sort of tempers it. And what I'm hoping there, what I feel like it does, and what I've seen players that I've played Coriolis with, is they're like, do I want to succeed enough to give Scott another die? Mm-hmm. Do I want to succeed enough to put that NPC at risk? To I spend darkness points to turn off your Mercurian weapon.
Yeah.
Right? To have your cell be dead, Right.
Yeah, I had barely used it, and it already went. The flashlight already went out.
And I think that's the thing is like you're saying, like in D&D, like a standard DM could just say that your sword stops working, right?
Yeah.
But somehow it being kind of explained with the dice kind of makes, I don't know, it changes it changes your relationship with it as a player, even though it is kind of in a way like a Dumbo's feather kind of thing to an extent.
Yeah, but you are in control. Like you could starve me of darkness.
Well, sure.
I thought about that. I thought like, okay, if that cup goes empty, then what? Do you just be quiet and we tell you what's going on?
Basically, yeah. Well, but on the offset of that is then my power is in your failures.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if for some strange twist of fate, we're rolling really well. You're not gonna have those darkness die to utilize.
Yeah.
Now, I happen to not be rolling very well at all, and so there was plenty to go around. But I had stopped and thought, I wonder what happens if that's empty.
Yeah. We've had several sessions of Otherscape now where people are just rolling boxcars like they're going out of style. And it's like a 2d6 system, and 12s are automatic successes. You're like, 12. I'm like, I don't have any consequences to throw at you guys. I mean, you just like, walks it through the adventure, Like, all right, it happens, right?
Yeah.
So
it's not even the bad thing necessarily. I mean, it's all the time, right? But
Also, I do feel like one thing you guys didn't get to engage with mechanically, because you weren't rolling a lot of successes, is the ability to spend successes. Right. So this has a system where if you have 1 6, it's a regular success. You need 3 in order to get a higher success, and then
a
margin of
4,
success.
we could take 1 out and hold it.
Right. That kind
it's funny because that's one of the things
we need our own darkness.
Right.
So
Yeah. But I think that's a pretty like with dice pool systems, it seems like a natural thought to have. I mean, it's already explicit in the COD rules. Like if you get 5 successes, it's a dramatic success. But like, I don't think 3.
But what does that mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I usually have a scale kind of up, like, like if someone gets.
And that's why I like spending dice pools. I love dice pool systems because I like spending and adding to the narrative of saying, what does this mean? So you guys spent one to have the falling statue sort of atomize and create this line of fire, obstacle,
Yeah. And we've talked about this privately. I don't think we were talking about this in the show, but this is one of my things with the D&D that does get to me is you don't have a real measure of success. And dice pool systems aren't like exclusively have like purview of this, but like it certainly helps like where you're like, no, I got 3 successes. I got 2, I got 5. Whereas with D&D, it's like roll to hit. And if you need a 10 to hit and you roll an 18, it doesn't matter whether you roll an 18 or an 11.
Well, it certainly doesn't matter in fucking damage.
Right.
Good Lord.
Exactly.
I roll a 1. I roll a 1.
They aren't linked.
Yeah, but we were, you started us off in one of those, situations that were a hopeless situation. I mean, I was looking at it like, okay, my character is not really going to do melee. We got 1 gun against a bunch of more powerful guns. And it was the nature of, the way that that worked. That like suddenly, the environment would work to our favor. And had that been D&D or D20, like that, I don't know how we would have gotten.
You kind of hand waved it.
Yeah. You could use inspiration, right? Like they do have inspiration.
It just helps with the roll.
It does, but they do have some stuff in there that says you can like include narrative pieces. I remember reading.
If you're taking some liberty with it.
No, I think actually I remember running it in 2014.
Okay.
That had some pieces, or maybe that's just what I did.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because imagine us on a grid, you know what I mean, and us trying to run away or hide or whatever.
Right.
That ultimately, like they would have potentially been able to overpower us. But
I will say, I don't want to talk about this too much. I will say that when I run D&D, I try to have it feel like D&D, but I use things that I think a lot of DMs don't use, like conditions. Like, I will tell you, every player goes into a scenario likely starting with disadvantage. Like, monsters don't just hang out for you to kill them. Like, they're in their own environments. And part of the goal there for a player then is going into a situation, how do I remove that disadvantage through lore, through pulling them out of their environment?
Right.
And when you guys just went hog wild into a scene, you're always starting at disadvantage. The best you could do is roll 1.
But you also allow disadvantage to be removed through narrative means rather than like just formalizing it like, oh, I have to like, I can't remember off the top of my head what the exact, but there's like specific things you can get advantage for, and you can't just, be like, oh, I know this about dragons and I do this thing, narratively.
Right. That's where like lore comes in, where I say, if you know something about this thing and you find out about it or whatever the case is, then
if you can find a way to use it,
then you can use it. Like my favorite example is a troll, right? It's like, yes, if you read the book, everybody knows fire does blah, blah, blah. But if like, it's like there's good, the players knowing that are a good opportunity to then engage with lore and be like, all right, well, now I can have a mechanical benefit, not just, it stops them from healing. Cool. So that was that piece. I don't think we didn't really get to engage with the experience enough. I think you guys were role playing well enough, that was just good players, right? And, I don't want to say that good reward systems end up rewarding bad players more than they reward good players, because the good players are getting the rewards, but they would get the rewards anyway, right? Like, so we didn't really engage with that very often, but you would have probably thought about it a little more, because I know I do. And I know, Jamie, I gave you a shit ton of grief when we were doing the Exiles game, right? Because I wanted to be like, what's the max amount of XP that I can get in every session? And how do I get it?
Yeah, because as a player, I don't really care about that much. So,
which is really interesting to me. Like, my brain is just geared into...
Like, the thing for me is it's more like I get frustrated if the thing that's happening in the story isn't matched by the system, or the description of my character isn't matched by the system. So, like, in that way, I want to have more XP so I can make the character on the sheet more like the character that in the story narrative, you know? And D&D, that tends to angle things towards just power, but in a lot of systems, it's not just about that. And I don't, you know, that's something I like about, and you can bring that into D&D, but, you know, I'm just saying.
And if you remember when we started playing D&D, and especially as a dungeon master, you're having to add up every hit point that the fighter takes off and every spell level that the caster casts, and try, you know, and it becomes, you know, almost, incredibly unwieldy to try and keep track of all of that. So I think that's evolved over time to be more of the milestone type, you know, advancement and things like that. And I think that ends up being maybe preferential, because that's where you get those player characters that are like either min-maxing or, you know, doing things just for the sake of, you know, maximizing their experience points. And then you also end up with, you know, parties that have different levels, you know, and I think that might be something that, you know, really can have an impact on, you know, the fun that the players could have too. You know what I mean? So
I would be really curious also, you know, to hear from people as to, especially higher level games, how much you're engaging with the hit point system. Like, is it like, it's been a big departure for me in the past of just calculating hit points, and the idea that from 0 to 150, or I should say from 150 to 0, the character is exactly the same, you know?
And then you get to hear it 0 and you follow the run context.
Right. Which is why I use back in the day, and I don't know that they have them now, back in the day, for 3 and 3.5 and Saga, you used stat drains more heavily.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I had damage to strength and intelligence and wisdom. That stuff was so much more engaging to me.
You don't have that in 5e.
And you don't really have that in 5e, you know? But anyway.
And the same thing for running the monsters too, because as you're doing the combat, and it becomes then a grind.
Especially at higher level, because you have like these, 450 hit points or whatever.
Yeah, and you know, it's an inevitability, but you're still going round after round trying to, you know, reduce the hit points of the monsters, and you know, you're having you can characterize them, and you know, they're wounded, they're bloodied, and that kind of thing. But that, you know, that becomes almost again sort of like
flavor.
Well, and even that.
But more important, right? I get what you're saying.
Less descriptive over time, and
there's
more
only
like
so
just
many
identifying.
Ways you can describe someone swinging a sword.
Right.
It just, you know, like watching the Dungeons and Dragons film and watching, what was her name, Gerda, watching Michelle Rodriguez's character fight, and I'm like, this is not a fight you would see in Dungeons and Dragons. You know, and it's like, this is a fight. This is a great choreographed fight. This is something.
Yeah, a couple of them were, the choreography was actually pretty
really good.
Yeah, her picking up a helmet and smashing somebody.
And I'm like, I want to. And then the point where her axe melts in the lava and she pulls it out. She's like, you know, I'm just like, I like this. And I'm like, stuff like that never happens in Dungeons and Dragons. You
it's
know?
not set up for
you know,
it.
But it's like trying to think outside the box of the system. And I think there's an interesting thing going on there, right? Because you're saying, okay, good players and GMs are going to think outside the box. And kind of what we're saying is build a box for your players to play in that can include stuff like that, right? This is success systems, using inspiration. It's just an example, right? Because I've been perfectly honest with you, how many people actually use inspiration? I didn't think we used inspiration when we were playing D&D.
Nominally, but it wasn't.
Really?
It wasn't
A little bit. Yeah,
It certainly wasn't big rewards, right? Because I'd have been like gunning for inspiration, right? And using those in ways and systematizing it so that it's not just hand wavy.
Yeah, I have a couple different versions of that. I think some of them might be in the back of the DM's manual, the hero points and things like that.
Yeah.
But then, my experience is, you give them to a bunch of players, and then they forget to use them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or they'll like sit on it like a potion. Where
it's got
some.
Well, one of the mistakes of some of those systems have been like, oh, well, you can use this as hero points, but it's also what you use to level. And I'm like, no one's going to spend that. That's why I like Burning Wheel. Burning Wheel says, by the way, these are hero points that to level, you have to use them. You level from using Arda, from using Persona and Fate, you know.
Can I give you 2 examples actually that now my kids have taught me now that I'm playing with my kids? And again, just they're, being naive to the gaming system. But one is my 13-year-old will use whatever abilities they can right up front because they don't want to hoard them for later on. So they will just take the action surge on their fighter and use it on the first round every chance they get. And I go, wait a minute. Yeah, that actually works because now you're using it more than you wouldn't if you get to a rest and you don't use those abilities. And then the other one, just we were talking about just sort of flavoring the combat. My 10-year-old wants to make a cold shot every time. I want to shoot him in the eye. I want to shoot him in the wherever, you can imagine where a 10-year-old would want to shoot things. And I'm like, fine. You know what I mean? Like that, roll the dice and describe, and that hits, it still only does 3 points of damage, but you hit him right in the eyeball.
Well,
there are conditions attached to that.
There's a condition.
Right?
Well, you can do cult shots to have people like drop weapons and things like that, and they're not going to get blinded unless they only have one. Yeah. But I can't let, a regular attack, blind the Cyclops, if they were to fight a Cyclops. But, but to have the cold shot and the flavor, I think, I'm all about it rather than the more seasoned player going, I'm attacking, roll. I'm attacking, roll. You know what I mean? And not having that description.
And I will tell you also, there is a difference between like what's called drift and hacking, right? So here's where my brain, how this works. And I want you guys to sort of like rethink and like restructure how you think about this stuff. With the idea of the premise of D&D is just a game I know, right? Everybody has house rules, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I'm talking about is like, if I in any way talk about the weaknesses in a system, right? I'm talking about sort of as designed and played.
Right.
Now, we would all agree that a lot of people use a lot of house rules. Like you were saying that you had a house rule that a bonus was a potion, drinking a potion was a bonus action anyway. And then they changed it to that in 2024. And you start getting lost in what's house rules and what's not house rules and so forth. But
plus every table plays a game differently anyways, even without house rules.
Probably. So. But like, but it's interesting because I always don't want to hack a system too much and say that I'm playing that game, right? So there's some things that we're going to talk about, some subsystems, right? And I think it's sort of like, when we see it, there's some subsystems you're like, I'm still playing that game.
Right.
But other subsystems where you're like, we're kind of no longer playing this game. So like one of the things that I like and don't like is in 5e is I don't like that there's no good way to min-max, right? And the idea that advantage and disadvantage, which is the primary way you make things easier or harder, are not stackable. Right?
Intentionally,
you can only get one.
As a general rule, like if the question is, does it stack in 5e? Usually the answer is no.
It doesn't. Advantage and disadvantage. One point says it doesn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And then they cancel each other out, right? So you're either rolling 2 dice and taking advantage or taking disadvantage or rolling 1 die. Those are the only choices.
Yeah.
Now I understand why, because you don't want to be chasing, oh, well, I have 5 advantages and 3 disadvantages and what that looks like, blah, blah, blah. I get why they didn't, but it does really nut what you could do, because you could be like, okay, I'm going to do this awesome thing, and I'm going to do this awesome thing, and I'm going to stab him in the eye, and I'm going to piss in his face, and I'm going to demoralize him. Be like, it's a disadvantage. Yeah.
Do whatever.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Because you're making that call. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's a good. So the last thing I really want to talk about, is the systematic thing that I think made the most effect in this game, because Sean, if we made it a drinking game, the number of times you could be like, and the gods are real, and we'd be drunk. Right?
Yeah. I was excited about that.
I think the prayers, systematic prayers in this, really drove a lot of the narrative.
Sure. And because it's tied into the system, it compels you to, because my character, my sense of them would be that they wouldn't be that compelled to do prayers, but I certainly did more of them knowing that, the dice roll. But then you start thinking about the character, you can start thinking about the character differently when you start doing that, even though you're compelled by the system to say prayers after a certain point, that my character keeps saying these prayers, and just even subconsciously kind of like, why? That's kind of where role playing oftentimes starts, is something happens and you're kind of like, oh, why did that happen?
Yeah, but put yourself in the shoes of a true believer, and especially when the gods are, empirically real. So you can imagine with every swipe of the hand or whatever thing you're doing, you're saying a silent prayer or a prayer out loud. And even, you could imagine the characters would be that, zealous.
It does. I think it does such a great job bringing the fiction of the world into the game, because if you can think about it, where you have somebody, so in our culture, right, the idea of praying out loud in most of modern mainstream American cultures look kind of weird, right? That person's, they're religious, right? Like they're part of dogma, they're part of whatever. Like a lot of us don't engage.
Except when we're swearing.
Right, sure, right. A lot of us don't engage with that action. And, a lot of people do, right? I mean, I'm not saying that they don't, but even in a lot of religious circles, there's sort of like an active thing that they're doing, right? There's this sort of, I don't want to be diminishing and say that it's performance, right? But sometimes it is, right?
Well, it's performative, but that's it's a very like academic.
Yeah. But what this does is, and I think what I feel like you're getting at is that this is really demonstrating an interesting cultural underpinning where it's part of your every thought, even if you're not necessarily a religious character.
Right.
It's just second nature. You're just raised to be like, oh, judge, help me, kind of idea, right?
And we even touched on the fact that, it's a little underwhelming in like Game of Thrones, you know what I mean? Where that really, you would think in that world, right, some of those things would
They have the most mundane conversations under those trees.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
these
right,
groves are sacred.
It's got a face on it, for crying out loud.
Where's that face come from?
Why did nobody mention that? That looks like Bob. Cool. Anything else you guys want to talk about in terms of Coriolis and
just and perspective? And this is obvious, but I think it's worth calling out in the fact that I play D&D, and that's high fantasy, and it's also a system in the 5e rules and things like that. And as I'm migrating now to a new game, there's 2 obstacles. I mean, there's 2 things that I really have to wrap my head around. And one is, it's not high fantasy. This is another world.
Right.
That
We did throw you into the sci-fi segments. Yeah.
Right.
Trust me, we'll get to the fantasy, I promise.
Well, not even that. Like whatever, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, I've heard you guys talking about all of these other games, whether it's Cthulhu and you know, even Blades of the Dark,
Right.
which you know I know about, different time settings. And generally, again, if you approach me on the street and be like, "Hey, I want to play a game that takes place in like 1930s, like Dick Tracy detective kind of thing," I'd be like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just it's not high fantasy. It's not what I expect in terms of tabletop. And then on top of that, there's a whole different rule set. And you guys talked about how, you could play D20 with other games and
Sure.
to some extent, you guys do that. But here it's two different things that I had to immerse myself in.
Yeah.
Right.
In order to, in order to participate.
I mean, you're still a nerd, right? So we still
Right.
have, like you said, you're like, okay, I got space opera, right? Like
Well, and you said dark Middle Eastern space opera, and it wasn't until I saw the images from the Coriolis book, which again I'm going to point out is beautiful. And then I draw that parallel with Dune, which of course I love, and then go, oh, now I get it. And now I can see it, and now I really want to be a part of this world.
That great scene where Paul's coming out, like they very much changed in Dune. They very much changed the garden, and they made it these tall palm trees, right? But Paul coming out and seeing the adherents at those gates, right, who are doing their prayers and so on and so forth. Really powerful visual, right? So it does allow you to try to understand and bring this, I definitely think anybody who's going to run Coriolis absolutely should watch Dune, right?
Well, one of the things, I think the entrance point for a lot of these things for me is in films or movies. It's not usually in games. It's usually starts there, and it's usually like multiple things where it's like, it's funny. I never have played Dune, played like The Expanse, played like an RPG that's specifically like that setting. It's usually like in my head, it's like I want to take this, a dab of this, a dab of that, a dab of this. Okay, you put them together, what do you get? Like kind of thing, But a lot of systems are that way. But I haven't. It'd be interesting actually to play like either the Expanse RPG or one of those RPGs that's like very specific to a setting, that's married to the setting.
It might make it easier. I mean, I certainly like this, but I think, then everybody's coming to the table with a shared.
Yeah. Oh, that can be the thing with me. That can be a limitation too.
You're so worried about like canon,
right? Exactly. Like especially trying to say at the same time period as the show or whatever.
I think that was actually one of the weaknesses of the old World of Darkness, and a lot of conversations around the old World of Darkness was that there's such a significant meta plot. Right. That all of the books actually adhered to a progressing timeline towards Gehenna. And I think that really stymied people. I think they were like, well, either fuck it and I'm not going to worry about it at all, or we're such slaves to the canon. Oh, well, we can't do this because this person's going to show up later on and do this thing for that.
That's exactly right. And that's the reason why I almost immediately got into using World of Darkness to run anything but World of Darkness. Actually, the first time I ever ran it was with Ravenloft. To preview, as I went through in my head what D&D modules are going to go, and you guys know this, my affinity for Dragonlance, which has its own, it's not a movie, but it has its own set of novels, and then if you put yourself in that world, you've got to make a decision in terms of where you're going to be in that world, and I'm quite certain that's what we're going to be playing. And so again, like how does that fit into the characters and the expectations? So
how did you interact with that for our weird campaign? Like when you GM'd, your piece of the puzzle was when the characters went to Kryn, right? How did you sort of manage? Did you just like throw canon out the window? Did you how did you navigate through us stomping around your darling?
We kind of Forrest Gumped it a bit, didn't we? a little bit.
Well, no, I mean, that wasn't my intention, but I think that the characters from the novels were there, the story and what was going on from the novels were there. I think, and even the most recent Dragonlance, module or book, is sort of set in the backdrop of all of those things happening. But then I think the way we Forrest Gumped it, or, I wouldn't say sort of maybe did an alternate, Star Trek timeline, was that there was also something else going on in the world that was significantly altering what was going on with the book. So if we made any sort of,
because we were like
fatalistic and
Raceland and Carmen did that too.
They were there. So
actually, my character Alexia at a certain point, anyways, had gotten in his head to try to take Raceland's place.
Right.
Yes. Right. What would you have done?
but you knew that was a possibility because Raceland, having taken over Fistendantilus or vice versa, was a thing in that world that would lead to power, and that was certainly where Alexi was at.
Right. Exactly.
I think what was more interesting about that was how Alexi matched up to the character in Stranger Things before Stranger Things even came out.
Oh, right. The Vecna plot line. Yeah.
The fact that the plot line that you established with Alexi becoming what's his face, the Lich, Vecna, then played out in Stranger Things.
I know.
And then the oddest thing for me was the character that played Vecna in Stranger Things. The actor was
kind of like I thought. Oh, yeah.
The actor was named Jamie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
He kind of looked like I imagined Lexi.
That all happened before Stranger Things came out.
Yeah,
I just thought that was wild.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else we want to talk about in terms of Coriolis and some of the system stuff that we experienced today?
I think we covered most of the things that immediately, kind of popped out at me about it. I'll probably digest about it a little bit because we just played it. But I definitely would play it again.
Great.
So,
great.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to playing again.
Yeah.
I love Coriolis. I really do. I like, I'm not certain that I care one way or not about this is sort of Free League's, one of Free League's core systems. Like several games use this system, including Alien and Blade Runner, which is of course the same world, different, times. And not interestingly enough, not a lot of their fantasy systems, right? So like Dragonbane is a completely different system, as is Forbidden Lands, right? But a lot of these have also different, a lot of these games in Free League also have different designers, so they don't have like a house system as compared to say Son of Oak has the Mist engine and does like City of Mist and other scales like Legends of the Mist. Yeah. And it's more or less the same system, but I do like this and I like Coriolis, something that Alien does that I try to incorporate a little bit, which you guys saw with the mental stress, right? Is that mental stress idea comes out of Alien.
Okay.
Right.
And it makes sense for Alien for sure. I mean, it makes sense for Coriolis too. But.
Quite honestly, in running this, Mark and I were really sort of like, well, do we want to run Alien and Blade Runner, or do we want to run Coriolis? And I think Coriolis has, the darkness between the stars element, I think is a really powerful piece, incorporating that, right? And using darkness points, which is very unique to Coriolis, using darkness points is, I think, the big driving factor for me. And like how GMs, like, I feel like I could do a lot more shit to you guys, right? And like in terms of social contract.
Right, it gives you permission.
It gives me permission. And a lot of GMs, I think, like wince under that idea of like, I need permission to fuck my players over.
Because you're just bringing it out of the blue and you're just doing it to them.
Right. You gave me a pile of darkness points,
Exactly. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm actually pondering playing with making a variation of that and playing with that in some of my games and see.
Awesome. Well, Sean, glad to have you.
Yeah,
looking forward to having the four of us in the same room. I think that's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
We're going to talk
one of these days.
One of these days, we're going to talk more about. We have a number of different games. We're going to be doing APs now that we have sort of 4 people in the mix. Like if one of us sort of steps off, then I feel like we can do a consistent AP,
Right.
which I'm really excited about because I have so many fucking games in my head and I need to get them out. Awesome. Thanks for joining the conversation.
You have been listening to another episode of the Modern Mythology podcast. We hope we gave you something new to think about that you can bring to your RPGs, writing, and other character-based games and art forms. Produced by James Kershaw. Soundtrack by Scott Landis and James Kershaw. For more information about this episode, articles, or links to our other related projects, visit modernmythology.net.